Hi, and welcome to Bible Secrets, a contemporary podcast series about the origins, translations, and interpretations of the Bible and Holy Scriptures.
We hope you enjoyed this piece of art in the form of discussion, which was derived from hours of independent study and a burning passion for seeking truth and wisdom.
We speak freely on this podcast, so there may be language that's not entirely suited or agreed with everybody, but it's meant to be fun while it's also educational.
Please like and subscribe, share, and help us reach more people and inspire conversations that can both be hard but necessary. This is Bible Secrets.
Hell yeah!
I wanna know what the meaning of life is. I wanna know the cost of your faith.
Babylon.
Babylon, welcome back, everybody. We are just going to continue on this roll that we are on. Episode 3, we are on to Babylon and Nimrod.
So, we, on the last episode, just wrapped up Flat Earth and established that the Bible says that there are 3 heavens. There is a heaven which is the sky above us, where the birds fly, or fall, I guess, if they're getting shot out of the air.
Yep.
You have heaven number 2, which is the firmament, which may or may not be the dome above us. And then you have heaven number 3, which is where God resides. So, there is this ancient story in the Bible which refers to the Tower of Babylon, or the Tower of Babel. And Cougar's really the first person, go figure. Throughout a lot of this podcast, you'll hear me say that Cougar's the first person that's brought this to my attention. And he asked me, he goes, what do you know about Nimrod? What do you know about the Tower of Babel? Now, my question to you before we dive into anything is, what spurred you to ask those questions?
It was absolutely the research that I was doing involving the biblical universe and the firmament, because the implications of having a firm, strong sky and an adversary that in one of these verses says that he wants to exalt his throne and be like the Most High. To do that, you'd have to go and exalt your throne where his throne is. And if you go back to our other episode, we understand that his throne is above the firmament. And so when they're building, the verse is they built their tower unto heaven, or they wanted to build their tower unto heaven. Again, if we have a direction of up and down and that's it, it's not relative. They were fucking building up to the firmament, bro. They were building up to the heaven.
Probably to go through the firmament.
To attack God. They were going to put themselves in the same place as God. And obviously they weren't going to accomplish that, but with the context of the firm sky and God being literally above, it's just like, damn, that story takes on a whole new life of its own. But even regardless of that, it's still a very, very pivotal and important story, because you get into that's where allegedly all the religions stem from, is when the Babel. You can get into that. Give me what you understand of this book.
Yeah, we'll go into that for sure. I mean, this is still found in Genesis, which we were talking about at the end of the last episode. Before I go into it, I real quick, I just want to know, because you're a very interesting guy, Coog. You're not someone who just takes information and just says, oh, well, because I was taught this, I can't believe X. Because I was taught X, I can't believe Y. Whatever.
Right.
You want to dive into everything. And what's really fascinating to me about you is you want to have, it's not fascinating, but it's just not something that a lot of people do, is you want to have conversations with people.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Not just people like me who are possibly numbskulls who are just kind of throwing around whatever we believe, but people who are really defined as experts in their field.
Right.
You have been messaging pastors.
Yeah.
So before I go into what I believe about Nimrod and Babylon and the Tower of Babel, what do the pastors tell you about why they were trying to build the tower?
Or that's a beautiful question. And it's important. And that's, so they believe that they were just going to build a really tall tower, and it was going to reach unto heaven, and they say that it was the first heaven. So that's just, it's going to reach up into the sky, high into the sky.
Just a tall building.
Just a tall building. And because obviously if they were going to build it as high as they could, they would build it into space, and that would be silly. So they obviously weren't going to do that, which I can understand that. I'm not saying that that's wrong. So Nimrod, and we'll get into Nimrod, was an adversary of God, or a rebellious against God.
That's what his name means. Nimrod means to rebel.
To rebel, yes. And so they just told me that he wanted to build a high tower so people would worship that tower versus worshiping God, and try to essentially exalt his throne like the Most High, meaning that they would create this tower and it would take the place of God. And so I can see that. I really can. You know?
And that's actually, that description right there isn't necessarily too far off. Not necessarily for the Tower of Babel,
absolutely,
but definitely for Nimrod.
Yeah, I agree.
So I have my old lady glasses on here, aka my seeing eyes, because I'm going to be doing a lot of reading for this specific episode off of my laptop. So please forgive me if you're watching this and there's a glare in my glasses. Okay, so when we go into Nimrod, the first place that we see Nimrod in the Bible is in Genesis 10:8. And it says, "And Cush begat Nimrod, and he became a mighty one on the earth." Okay.
And could we also say that I think the KJV says that he's a mighty hunter? So mighty one, mighty hunter.
Genesis 9 says that.
Oh, my bad. Okay, keep going.
You're good. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Fuck.
You're good. Wherefore it is, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Right? So it's just saying that he's a hunter before the Lord.
Right.
And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. So right here, we actually see that Nimrod is the founder of Babel. He's the first king of Babel.
Right.
So the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calane in the land of Shinar. Okay, so in Babylon you have a bunch of different regions, sects. It's a big. Babylonia is like the massive state. It's the land that it falls in.
And then it has states within that.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Regions, if you may.
Right. Okay.
Right. So then you have the region of Shinar, and in the region of Shinar you have Babylon.
Okay.
Okay. So Babylonia, Shinar,
and
Babylon,
and it's right in the middle.
I don't necessarily know if it's right in the middle.
Okay.
But it's in that region.
Okay.
I think we might go into that because they establish Shinar before they establish Babylon.
Got you. Okay.
Out of the land went forth Ashur, and builded Nineveh. And Ashur they kind of think is also Nimrod. Ashur means Assyrian.
Okay.
And Babylon is like close to Assyria. So they kind of think that Nimrod was a part of Assyria and then came out of that to build Babylonia or Babylon. Okay. So out of the land of Ashur and builded Nineveh and the city of Rehoboth and Calah, and risen between Nineveh and Calah, the same great city. I think that's talking about Babylon. Okay. So here we kind of understand that Nimrod is a king and has lots of different lands. And when you look at Nimrod, you understand that we might not even know his name. We call him Nimrod, but that means, like you said, to rebel.
To rebel.
Okay.
The rebeller. So all we're saying is that he rebelled against something, but that's might not be literally his name.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. In Greek mythology, the founder of the city Nineveh is a guy by the name of Ninus.
Okay.
And here we say out of the land of Ashur and builded Nineveh. So we see here talking about Ashur being Nimrod, building Nineveh. Out of Ashur, he came from the land of Assyria to build Nineveh.
So is this an expansion of Babylon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Nineveh is an expansion of Babylon or Babylonia.
Babylonia, okay.
Right. So you have Ninus, possibly, who is Nimrod, or in other, I think it's Assyrian texts that say the king of Erech, Erech, was a guy named, what was his name? Emukai, something like that. He had a different name there too. So there is a good possibility that we don't know Nimrod's name. That it was something else, but because throughout history, his name just means to rebel because that's what he was trying to do.
Right, okay.
Right? So then you get into who is Nimrod. He's this king. He found Babylon. But the interesting thing is that he's very early in human history. He's actually the great-grandson of Noah.
Oh, damn.
So Noah has the flood. Boom, flood comes down. And he brings 2 of each animal on the ark, right? This is the Bible story.
Right.
His wife, and then his 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham. And I
Okay.
think Ham's the youngest, but he might not be. Japheth might be. But those are his 3 sons and their wives, okay? And Ham is Nimrod's grandpa. So Ham then begats Cush. And as we read in Genesis 10:8, Cush begats Nimrod. Okay? So he's the great-grandson of Noah.
So he's very early.
He's very early.
Yep.
And the question of, like, why did Nimrod get placed to be king comes up a lot. They're like, why this guy? Right? And there's 2 reasons that I kind of think, and both of these are from the book of Jasher, which, for anyone who doesn't know about the book of Jasher, the book of Jasher is a deuterocanonical, I think, or apocrypha text.
Okay.
They're texts that were maybe accepted at one time in the early Roman church and then got taken out. Maybe they were passed throughout history in an early time, but just didn't get included in the actual canonical texts. But the book of Jasher does exist in some Catholic Bibles, I think even still today.
Damn, okay.
Okay. And in the book of Jasher 7:24, you read about this garment. And this garment is the garment that God made for Adam after him and Eve sinned.
Okay.
Okay.
And you have it like when? Like, is this in Nimrod's time too? They have this garment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the garment gets passed down through generations because it's looked at to have special powers. I mean, anything that comes from God, right, especially like the first piece of clothing ever made for his first creation, is going to have some sort of mystical power, people think, but at the end of the day, it's going to give you status nonetheless, right?
Some sort of value for sure.
Exactly. So what happens with this garment is it gets passed down through the ages until it comes to Noah. And it's getting consensually passed down until then, but Ham and Noah really have a conflicting relationship. There's even a time, I think, when it's Noah gets drunk and on the ground and he's naked, and Ham comes over and just like, calls him names and just makes fun of him. And that's really a testament to God being like, you should honor your father and your mother, right? Yep. And because Ham didn't do that, he was kind of an accursed son. Ham ends up stealing the garment from Noah. So it's consensually passed down until Ham. And then Ham passes it down.
He stole it for good. Like, he got it and got away with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Ham passes it down to Cush, and Cush passes it down to Nimrod. In Jasher 7, we see here in verse 24, and the garments of skin which God made for Adam and his wife when they went out of the garden were given to Cush. So that's just like one verse saying, it's Adam, and then it makes it down to Cush. And then in verse 28, we have, and when Ham begat his firstborn Cush, he gave his garments in secret. So Ham in secret gives his garments to Cush. So no one really knows about it, right?
Right.
And they were with Cush many days. And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers, so doesn't tell anybody about it. So Ham's like, listen, we stole this. Don't tell nobody.
Okay.
And Cush also concealed them from his sons and brothers. And when Cush had begotten Nimrod, he gave those garments through his love for him. And Nimrod grew up. And when he was 20 years old, he put on those garments.
And so before this, do they have any power, or is this King Cush? Like, is he a king that he's passing the throne to Nimrod? Or is this leading up to how Nimrod was able to get into power?
This is leading up to how Nimrod is going to get into power.
Because right now, it's not like Cush dies and then he's king, right? That's not what the situation is.
No. And you'll even see that in these next couple of verses. So that's the first kind of like question of, Nimrod is this mighty man. He's this mighty hunter before the Lord. And that's in Genesis 10. And then if you actually go to those verses, a lot of people say that those verses are better translated to, he was a mighty hunter in spite of the Lord. So like against God.
Because I've heard people say like a hunter of souls almost.
Yes, a hunter of men.
And if that's the case, that would be something hunting against God.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Or against God's people, maybe, right?
Right. Okay.
So you have him be placed as the first king of Babylon, and you can see that those garments may have had, an effect on his status at least.
Right.
In Jasher 7, we read, and Nimrod became strong when he put on the garments. So there was something about the garments that made him strong. I don't know if that's physically or if that's amongst men in status.
Okay.
And God gave him might and strength, okay? And he was a mighty hunter in the earth. Yea, he was a mighty hunter in the field. And he hunted the animals, and he built altars, and he offered up the animals before the Lord.
Okay.
Okay?
So that's a good thing, right?
You would say so until you get to the next verse.
Okay.
Verse 31 says, and Nimrod strengthened himself. Okay? So Nimrod strengthened himself, and he rose up from against men and brethren, and he fought the battles of his brethren against all their enemies round about. And the Lord God delivered all of his enemies of his brethren to his hand, and God prospered him in the time of his battles, and he reigned upon the earth. So you kind of have this conflicting relationship between Nimrod and God, right? Where it's like, where Nimrod is hunting animals, building offers, offering them up to the Lord, but it also says that he's relying on his own strength for other things.
Right.
There's a famous Christian historian named Flavius Josephus. Okay. And
I've heard that.
Yeah, and he wrote this book called Josephus, and he lived after the time of Christ, but he wrote about Nimrod. From a historical sense as well. He wrote about things that happened before him.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And in Josephus, he talks about how Nimrod actually was deifying himself as well. And he was telling men to turn away from God and to turn towards him.
Right.
That to turn towards God is almost a cowardly move.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's getting away from putting your faith in God, and more like in verse 31, and God strengthened himself, or Nimrod strengthened himself rather.
Right. So he's got faith in himself.
Faith in himself.
Okay.
But there's still kind of this battle, right, where it seems like God's still kind of blessing Nimrod. Nimrod's still kind of giving some up to God, but he's kind of fallen into this power that he has.
He's fallen in love with the power. Okay.
And he said to them, this is verse 36, this is right before they're about to go to a big war. So they're about to have like a big war. Nimrod isn't king yet, I don't think.
Okay.
But they're about to have this big war. It's like it's like a fight over nations. It's like a fight with their brethren, like just another tribe.
Right. Okay.
And Nimrod said to them, and this is really interesting to me, do not fear, neither be alarmed, which is the first thing that angels always say.
True.
When they show up. They say, don't be afraid, do not be alarmed. For our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please. Okay?
Okay.
So when it says that Nimrod is a mighty man on the earth,
Mighty man.
a lot of people that I've heard have claimed that Nimrod may have been a part of the Nephilim. Okay? And the Nephilim are fallen angels. When Satan decided that he wanted to rise up against God. This is like the story of Satan's fall, right? Mm-hmm. He is... Do you remember his position in heaven? Like what he's supposed to do? I know that he's the god of music.
An anointed cherubim. So
yeah.
I don't know what is the exact role.
He's a high-ranking member of God's army, though, God's angels.
Yes, yep.
And he decides that he wants to deify himself and be placed on the same seat as God.
Yes, yep.
And God says, no, that's dumb. I'm God. And now you're banished down to earth,
right?
Or to hell or whatever.
And his ideology remained the same as he later talking about like wanting to exalt his throne. Oh, Lucifer, wanting to exalt your throne like the Most High. Like
exactly.
He had that intention initially, and then even when he fell, that's his ideology is he wants to do that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. He still wants to do that, right? He still wants to rule over all.
Right, yep. And deify himself.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, with Satan, there came a third of the angels. So Satan actually is a pretty persuasive guy.
Yeah,
right.
A big player in this if he can do a third of the angels.
People who know God, who have seen God on a daily basis, will say, "Oh no, I'll go with you, Satan." And these are the people who a lot of Christians who I've heard believe in is the Nephilim. Can you pull up Genesis 6:8 real quick? Because I think Genesis 6:8 is the one that talks about that there were giants even after the flood. So when you get into the idea of who are these Nephilim, who are these angels, you go into like when did they exist and did they exist pre or post flood, and you'll see that the Bible will preach that they 6:4 if you could.
NASB, is that probably the easiest to read for everybody?
Probably.
Okay. And I can't remember what verse.
6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth. So in Genesis 6:4, you see the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God, came in to the daughters of mankind, and they bore them children. Those were the mighty men, and they were old men of renown. Okay?
Okay.
Those were the mighty men,
Mighty man.
right? The Nephilim who chose daughters.
Okay.
Okay?
And
So-
so the Nephilim are fallen angels.
Are fallen angels. And then you question about, a lot of people say that they were giants. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean that they were giants?
Yeah, like 10 feet,
Yeah, that's
12 feet.
That's what
If I saw a 10-foot guy standing next to me, I'd say, damn, you're a giant, bro. I'd say that.
So then you get to this book of Enoch. And the book of Enoch, again, is an apocryphal text. It's not a text that's always accepted. It's accepted, I believe, in the Ethiopian Bible,
Yep.
in many African Bibles, in some others here and there. But it's a text that's kind of debated. But they do talk about these giants. In chapter 3 of Enoch 1, they talk about that same thing where it says that the Nephilim were on the earth and they were in the days, you're good, and the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind. So like it's talking about the sons of God, these fallen angels, taking upon wives.
Okay.
You see the same thing in Enoch 1, chapter 3, called fallen angels. Okay?
Right.
And it talks about how they got together and they were like, well, we're here, so we might as well take these women for our wives and produce children.
Yes. Okay.
And it says, and they became pregnant, talking about the wives, and they bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells.
Okay. And what's an L?
An L, a lot of people
Is
believe,
this EL or like a literal
ELLS, L's.
L's?
L's.
Okay.
3,000 L's. A lot of people think that L's are pretty close or in a proximity of 18 inches.
Okay. Oh shit.
See what I'm saying?
So way over.
So if you got 3,000 L's, you got hella big people, right? Like we're talking like, we're talking
Let's see here.
30,000 tall or what? I don't know. Because we're talking about inches, right?
Okay.
So it's not even just like feet. You got like 12. So what is
450 feet.
450
tall,
feet tall? Okay. That's what these mighty men are. Okay. And in First Chronicles,
It's a big old wiener to take trying to get pregnant by it.
or maybe they've been taking too much roids, son, and they got
Maybe they
nothing.
could just make it happen.
They got,
babe. Okay.
as
Yeah.
Benchwarmers told me, macaroni and cheese makes your pee-pee small, okay? And in First Chronicles 1:10, which they actually tell you to look up when you read Genesis 10:8, which talks about Nimrod being a mighty man among the earth.
Right.
First Chronicles 1:10 says that he was the first mighty man on the earth.
Right.
So there's a possibility that he's the first Nephilim, the first of these giant
The first
men
fallen angel.
to be born. Not necessarily like fallen angel, but fallen angel offspring.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Okay. So they go to battle. Nimrod, obviously by this time, is taller than Dennis Rodman 40 times.
Yeah.
And in verse 39 of Jasher 7, it says, and when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all of his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them, and they placed the regal crown upon his head. Okay. So they made him king, the book of Jasher says, after they went into this war, and I'm sure Nimrod, murdered...
Fucked everybody up.
Murdered thousands of people.
I'd hate to fight a 450-foot man.
Especially if he's got a small wang.
Yeah.
And so you see that Nimrod is like this guy who's possibly ethereal, right?
Ethereal.
Ethereal meaning like of heaven.
Okay.
Like he's possibly like not of this earth and maybe like a
Right.
demi sort of
Yes.
creation. And he's a mighty hunter among the Lord, and he's beginning to strengthen himself, right?
Okay. Right.
So, so then you go into, sorry, I'm just going over these notes real quick. So then you go into finding Babylon, okay? So Jasher 7 kind of talks about how they built Shinar. They said they found... Go ahead.
He's not king yet.
He is king.
He's king now over Babylon?
Over essentially all of the earth. Like most of the people around, I think at this point, are saying that like Nimrod's the king.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get into Jasher 7, and they say he was reigning according to his heart's desire, talking about Nimrod. After having conquered all of his enemies around, he advised his counselors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar.
Shinar.
Okay, which is in the region, which is in Babylon, is in Shinar.
Okay.
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 But at this point, I think it's just a city. For the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies and subdued them. So over everybody who's trying to mess with Nimrod, Nimrod's like, no way. Prospered in all of his battles, and his kingdom became very great. Large city. And all the nations and tongues heard of his fame, and they gathered themselves to him, and they bestowed down to earth, and they brought him offering, and he became Lord and King. So this is, everyone in the earth is like, yo, Nimrod's the guy. He's messing everybody up. He's 450 feet tall, giant dude. And they all dwelt with him in the city of Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. So that's important right there, right? Like he reigned under all of the sons of Noah, which is everybody on the earth, because this is post-flood.
Right.
Yep. And all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord, and he was more wicked than all of the men that were before him from the days of the flood until those days. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed to them, and he rebelled against the Lord and taught all of his subjects and people of the earth his wicked ways.
Wow.
So this is getting outside of text, but when you really start to look at ancient Babylon, you see that it was a very diverse city.
Right.
It had lots of exports of gold. I mean, it's a historical city, right? Like, it's not like Babylon isn't some myth, some made up thing. Like, historians will claim that Babylonia is one of the 5 original great empires.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Along with Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, Greece, and Egypt. Like, those are like the original 5. Yeah, like it's a real thing. And when they talk about Babylon, they talk about how it has these like exports of gold, and they were really big in agriculture, and they were great in like fashion and luxury and cloth. Wow. They had hanging gardens. This is still a thing like to humanity that they go, what are you talking about? Like they had these gardens in the sky, which if you think about it, the Garden of Eden, right, essentially would be a garden in the sky. If the Garden of Eden is in heaven, in the sky, i.e. above us, biblical universe, right, they're trying to rebuild sky gardens.
Right.
Okay.
Trying to make themselves like God, right?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
It was also a very diverse city.
We're going to have to time out.
You're good. I know exactly where I was there, so that's all good.
Perfect. Phone is alive. I think if I set my settings. Oh, bitch.
You're back on right there. Oh, did you get texted?
Yeah, I that's not, she texted me like 20 minutes ago.
Oh.
For whatever reason, it just
stopped working.
stopped fucking going. But we back.
Okay.
Okay. How's that? That's good.
Great, brother.
Scoot it back just a little bit. There you go. Okay, you remember where you're at?
Absolutely.
Okay, go for it.
It was also a very diverse city. Like in Babylon, you had Assyrians, you had Babylonians, you had people from like all over the earth, Egyptians. You even had Semitic people who were the descendants of Shem, who was Ham's brother.
Right. Okay.
Right. And Semitic is also where you get like Jewish, right? Like Semites.
Oh, like
anti-Semitic, right?
I've heard that.
But that's from the line of Shem.
Okay.
Okay. So even in Babylon, you had the people who were warring, who Nimrod was warring against, right?
Right. Okay.
And from the line of Shem, from the Semitic people, you're going to get Abraham. And this is very important because Abraham is the father of all nations. God calls Abraham set apart to leave and like go like, you know, find the land of milk and honey or whatever. I don't know if it's the land of milk and honey, but it's like God calls him to be the father of his people.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where you get the Israelites is from the Semitic people, which come from Shem, which Babylon had those people in it, and Abraham lived there.
Got you. Okay.
And Abraham's father, when we go back to the verse where it talks about, where it talks about that he made gods of wood and stone. It's pretty acclaimed that Nimrod was a massive polytheist. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but
A multiple god.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
He had a god for every single day of the year. There were 360 days back then because their calendar went off of the moon rather than the sun.
Okay.
And so each month consisted of like 29 and a half days. Not really sure how that works, but it does.
Okay.
And they had 360 days.
Right.
And he had a god for every single one of those days. And Abraham's father was actually an idol maker inside of the city.
Oh shit. Okay.
So it's pretty prevalent why God would call a son of an idol maker who probably doesn't even want to make the idols. I don't know if that's for certain.
Right.
But that's why he would call him out, because God's trying to kind of throw it in the face of Nimrod. Okay, so Nimrod's this great guy, man. He's really king. He's trying to have a diverse city. And when I think of like Nimrod or Babylon, I really think of like Rome. Like I think of like ancient Rome or like New York City. You know what I mean? Just like a place where there's a lot going on.
It's the hub. Yeah.
There's this thing and that thing. It's like the hub. It's like, and everyone's like, man, I want to be in New York City. I want to be in Babylon. You know what I mean? Like what would have been like to be in like ancient Rome with the Colosseum and the craziness.
Right.
And okay. So they find Babylon, they find the city. And then in Genesis 11:4 you have, and they said, go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top will reach unto heaven.
Right.
Right? So they're trying to reach heaven. They want to build this tower.
It's going to be big at the very least.
It's going to be big, real big. And then in Genesis 11:7-8 it says, go to, let us go down. This is God talking about the tower, how he came down and confused their language, right?
Right. So they couldn't communicate, so they couldn't build the tower anymore.
But before that, they were building the tower.
Right.
And there's a lot of accounts that were saying that the tower was actually so big. I mean, it was essentially a wide base that was building up into a point, which if you think about Freemasonry is very close to an obelisk.
Oh, right.
Right. And a lot of people would say that the tower was it was very tall, but it was so wide that it almost shrunk the size of the tower. If that makes sense. Like it was so wide that even though it was, massively tall, that they were like, it's not that tall, but you're like, no, it's pretty tall, but it's also very wide.
Right.
So it was a very big building that they were doing, right?
Interesting.
'Kay.
So it's almost like a city in a building. You know what I'm saying? Like a whole literal civilization living inside of one tower.
Maybe.
Because if it's that big,
it might just be outside. I don't really know about like the position of the tower. I think it was in the center of the town.
Right.
But
okay.
I don't know like exactly where it was.
Okay.
Now you go back into Jasher, right? Like Nimrod is very poorly represented in the Bible. He's taken out a lot. There's not a lot about Nimrod. There's not a lot about Babylon. There's not a lot about Babel. But when you go into Jasher, you can read chapters and chapters and chapters about all of this stuff. Okay?
Right.
So you go into Jasher 9, and it says, and the king Nimrod reigned securely. All of the earth was under his control, showing that he's the king of the earth. And all the earth was of one tongue and was of one union. And the princes of Nimrod and his great men took counsel together. Phut, Mitzrayim, Cush, his dad, is a prince of him, and Canaan, with their families, and they said to each other, come, let us build ourselves a city, referring to Babylon, and in it, right? So this would say that I think that the city is outside of it.
Right.
And a strong tower. And its top reaching to heaven, and we will make ourselves famed, so that we may reign over the whole earth, in order that the evil of our enemies may cease from us, and we may reign mightily over them, and that we may not become scattered among the earth on account of their wars.
Wow.
Okay?
Right. Well, and what my point from earlier was that this thing is so big it's almost as if it's its own city within its bounds. You know what I'm saying?
Probably.
Like, so big that it's got gardens, it's got stores, it's got its own ecosystem almost.
Absolutely.
Because it's so impressively big.
About that, I think you're probably right. I think it probably has its own stuff going on even inside of the tower.
That's fucking crazy.
It's huge, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Verse 22 of Jasher 9. And they went before the king, and they told the king these words: how we're going to build them a city, tower, all this stuff. Okay. And the king agreed with them in this affair, and he did so. And all the families assembled together, consisting of about 600,000 men, not including women or children.
Right.
Again, we are 4 generations removed from having 8 people on the earth. And there's 600,000 men. Just crazy thought.
Is that even technically possible?
I don't know. You'd have to have a lot of incest.
Yeah, you would.
So I don't know.
Yeah, you would.
I don't know. But also you have to think about, like, people lived a lot longer times. If you want to take the Bible at its word, like, they lived until they were 700-800 years old.
Well, and if you're having children that whole time,
you're going to have a lot of kids. You're going to have a lot of people.
Kids, yeah.
Probably a lot of men.
Yeah.
Maybe 600,000.
Right, maybe.
I don't want to say that. I think it's pretty preposterous and out there.
You think it's too much?
I think it's too much.
Okay.
I think it's a lot too much.
Yep.
So take that for what you will. 600,000 men.
For sure.
And they went in to seek an extensive piece of ground to build the city and the tower. And they sought in the whole earth, and they found none like one valley at the east of the land of Shinar. So Babylon is east of Shinar.
Okay.
About 2 days' walk. And they journeyed there, and they dwelt there. And they began to make bricks and burn fires to build the city and the tower. And they had to imagine it complete.
Okay.
So the interesting thing about this is Babylon actually had pits around it as well, because around that time, so Babylon is located in what is modern day Iraq. Okay, it's in Mesopotamia.
Right.
And that region of the earth like floods a lot. So they actually built a lot of pits around Babylon because it was kind of an oasis, and when it would flood, it would cover the whole earth, it would cover the whole land until they built the pits.
Right.
So once they built the pits, I mean, you can imagine that made Babylon even more of like a, wow, we're really doing something
They had
here.
they had waterfront and everything now. Okay.
They're creating an ecosystem. Right.
Yep. Where people want to go there rather. They don't need anyone outside of themselves because they've set that ecosystem.
Exactly.
Okay.
They don't need God.
Right.
They have everything in Babylon.
Yep.
They have everything because of Nimrod.
Yeah, who needs God? Thanks, Nim. Yeah, hell yeah. Okay.
So the last 2 verses I think from Jasher that I have, and this is really what your question to me at the beginning was: why did they build the tower? Like, why were they building it?
Right. Yep.
Right. And the Bible says that they're building it so that they can reach heaven.
Right.
Nimrod and his princes were saying that they would do it so that they would become famed over the earth. But you'll see here in Jasher 9 verses 25 and 26 that the people actually had different reasons why they wanted to build the tower too.
Okay.
So Jasher 9 verse 25 through 26 says, and the building of the tower was unto them a transgression and a sin. So that's just saying that it was bad for them to do it.
Right.
And they began to build it, and whilst they were building against the Lord of God of heaven, they imagined their hearts to war against him and to ascend into heaven. And all these people and all their families divided themselves into 3 parts. So we got 3 distinct sections of these 600,000 men and their families.
Okay.
The first said, we will ascend into heaven and fight against him.
Oh, fuck.
Okay. The second said, we will ascend into heaven and place our gods there and serve them. And the third part said, we will ascend into heaven and smite him with bows and spears. And God knew all of their works and all of their evil thoughts, and he saw the city and the tower which they were building.
Wow.
Okay. So it's pretty clear here that no matter, first of all, they definitely thought that up is where God is. Okay. Confirming that the biblical universe is what they thought, that heaven is upwards.
Right.
To everybody.
Yep.
But what this also confirms is that they were building the Tower of Babel, and a lot of Christians say that God smited them, came down and confused their language, like it says in Genesis 11, 7 through 8,
right.
Like to confuse their language because they were acting against God solely out of disobedience. Okay, so in the book of Jasher, the Tower of Babel is actually built with like these bricks, and it also has pitch in it. And pitch is the same thing that Noah used on the ark. So like it was made out of wood, right? But between the wood, he put pitch. And pitch, I don't exactly know what it is, but it's like it's a waterproofing substance.
Oh, okay.
So
they pitched
shit
so it wouldn't flood.
So if there was a flood, they would be safe.
Right.
And a lot of Christians want to say, and I don't know if they talk about the pitch, but like they want to say that God didn't like the Tower of Babel because it was disobedient to him.
Right.
because he said to go forth through all the lands and multiply, and they were like, hey, we should just kind of all hang out together and worship Nimrod.
Yep.
And the other reason is because they didn't trust him.
Right.
Christians want to say that they were putting pitch in it because they weren't trusting that what God said about not flooding the earth
Yep, I've heard that. Yep.
was true, or was a lie. But in Jasher, I think you see something completely different. I think everyone is like, yo, we're going to go attack God.
There's a full awareness of God, and they want to do the exact opposite. So it's way different than just sinning or doing something wrong. It's, I have an awareness of God, and I want to go do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, were they just going to go into space? Where were they headed? Going up. That's very weird. Ascend and go up. Well, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to the moon? Well, shit, they probably were going to go to the firmament. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of if it's real or not, that's probably where they were going. It doesn't make sense if it's space.
I think they're trying to get through the firmament.
Absolutely, 100%.
I think that they're trying to get to the firmament so they can break that bitch. Yeah. And
they're trying to invade the throne. They're trying to invade heaven 3.
Yes.
And you have to go through heaven 1 and 2 to get there. Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So, Nimrod is this guy, right? And what's the verse that I asked you to have?
Oh, yes. Psalm, I believe.
Because this is what Cougar originally brought this to me, saying that Nimrod wanted to place Satan's seat, right? Like that's what your original argument was
yes.
that this verse right here.
Isaiah, sorry.
Isaiah 14:12-14, which says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground?" So he cut him down to the ground, which didst weaken thy nations. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, talking about Lucifer and or Nimrod. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds and be like the Most High. Be like the Most High.
Yep.
So where it says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, Cougar originally was thinking and kind of saying that he thought that this referred to Nimrod wanting to place Satan's seat, right? Is that your original argument?
Well,
was that
it
he was
that
worshiping Satan?
Yes, or the ideology of Satan. Because if this is regarding Nimrod right here, which I can't remember the whole connection that I had to it, but I will ascend into heaven and be like the Most High is like a satanic ideology. Yeah. And so even if, even if Nimrod wanted to go put his throne up there and not necessarily for Satan, that's still a satanic influenced ideology.
Absolutely. Because you're trying to lead people away from God and into something that isn't eternal.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So Nimrod's just kind of an interesting character because much like Satan, we don't know his name.
Right.
Right. Like people think that they know the name of Satan, but Satan, like you said before, Satan just means adversary.
Right. Yep.
Right. And they're like, well, his name's Lucifer. Well, Lucifer just means illuminated one.
Right.
Like these are not like names. Right. So there's something interesting to me to people who are in the Bible who who are called something else.
Well, I think that's the same with Jesus.
That's true.
I think Jesus Christ means like the Messiah or some shit. It has like it's Savior, like it's the Savior or something. You know
but his original name was like Yeshua.
Yeshua.
Or like Yehoshua or whatever.
Right,
like the original Paleo Hebrew. I don't remember. But like Yeshua is. So his name closer is related to Jesus, to Joshua.
Yep.
Than it is to Jesus.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, I just think that it's the most Nestorius or I guess mysterious characters in the Bible are all kind of different names.
Yes.
Right? Like they're not called. And I would exclude Jesus from that because there is an original writing of Jesus. You know what I mean? Whereas with these, it is to rebel, adversary. Whereas Jesus means the Savior, and that's what they called him.
Right.
But I can definitely see what you're saying on that. So Nimrod was obviously wasn't everyone's favorite guy always.
He's a big player in it though.
Big player.
But not everyone's favorite at all.
Not everyone's favorite. And he dies eventually.
Okay.
It isn't really known whether there's theories about if he got murdered by his friends. Like there's like a kind of Julius Caesar-esque story where it's like all of his adversaries get together and like poison him.
Right.
There's also another story where he dies because they like chop him up and they like move his parts to different parts of the earth.
Oh,
like
right.
they chop up into like 7 pieces,
That's,
14 pieces.
There's a parallel to that, and I think this the execution of Horus, where they chop him up and send him to the 4 quarters of the earth or some shit. You know what I'm saying?
And
Okay.
we'll get into that, right? Because there's a lot of possibility that that Horus is inspired by Nimrod.
Oh,
those stories. So Nimrod has this wife, and her name is Semiramis. And Semiramis is... Nimrod loves her, and all the other dudes in Babylon probably love Semiramis as well. You know,
Love me
she's
a little Semiramis.
You know, we get a little bit of Semiramis out here. Her name is spelled Semiramis, in case anyone cares. It's like Semiramus, Semiramis. And she's known as like the town whore, but she's Nimrod's wife, right? Which makes sense that a man who's away from God and who's trying to strengthen himself will take a very promiscuous woman.
Right.
Right. He's trying to find the opposites.
Yep.
So Nimrod goes away on this hunting trip. It's said that he's either killed by his adversaries, he's either killed and chopped to pieces, or there's also a story where he's killed by like a boar, like he's just killed by an animal out on the hunting trip.
The hunter becomes the hunted. Full circle, baby.
Not mighty anymore,
Not
son.
mighty, baby.
Not mighty, baby. Should have worn that loincloth.
Yeah.
And he, so Semiramis, when he's away, has an affair, of course, because Semiramis, and she gets pregnant. So in order to rectify that, because, you know, although everyone knows that Semiramis is kind of a little scoundrel, you know, she still wants Nimrod to live on. And by this time, I mean, Nimrod's a god.
Right.
You know, he's ascended himself into godhood. There's a possibility that he already is a Nephilim. So he is already part of what heaven was.
Right. Yep.
And if he truly was, you know, 450 feet tall or whatever,
That'd be so crazy, bro.
dude, so scary. You know what I mean? So like, if you saw a man who was 450 feet, would you think he was a god?
I think he was something bigger than me, man. Something greater than me. Because then, bro, just think about that little tangent. At some point, people had to like take him seriously. So instead of being like, "Holy fuck, you're 450 feet tall," I'd have to be like, "Well, it's like, what do you want for dinner tonight?" And just have to talk to them as if they're not 450 feet tall. You know? So I could just,
and then he looks down and goes, "I don't know, cheese pizza." Like, okay.
Yeah, that's funny as fuck. Okay.
So you get Semiramis doing the deed, someone else,
Right.
And Nimrod dies, and she is forced, or not forced, but really Semiramis is a big player in this too, because she's the one who at the end securely deifies Nimrod. She says that Nimrod died and became the sun, not like the son of God, like the sun that we see in the sky.
Right.
She says that Nimrod died and became the sun.
Like the fire sun.
Like the fire sun.
Okay.
And she had this baby, and she had this baby through immaculate conception. So that's the same thing that happened to Mary.
Right.
She said that the sun rays, after Nimrod died, came down and impregnated her so that she would have this demigod baby, Talmud. Talmuz.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
I think that speaks to the wisdom of whoever came up with that story. And it feels satanic. But Satan would have had to know that Christ was coming to try to form his own story of an immaculate conception and a son being born before Christ. Because this is all way before Christ, right?
Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that too off the podcast, right? Like, it's so a lot of people's issues with Jesus, and this is a big side tangent. We got to go back to Talmud or whatever Talmuz at the end of this. But a lot of people say that, you know, there's other characters throughout the history of the world that have very close similarities with Jesus, who came and turned water into wine, who were born of immaculate conception, who died and rose 3 days later, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And that gets into the question of, a lot of people say that those are all Satan's counterfeits, that Jesus is the true one.
Right.
Right. And Satan knew that Jesus was going to come, and so he had to create these counterfeits. Well, to me, and I'll have to look up this verse maybe, I think you can make a biblical argument that Satan doesn't know the future.
Okay.
And I think that you can see that through Job. So the story of Job is that, like, Job's a great guy, right? And he has all this stuff.
Right.
and the sons of men are coming to God, and Satan comes to God, and he's like, don't touch my people or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, not even my guy Job. My guy Job over here, he's a great guy. He's never going to turn from me. Okay. I don't know what he says to him, but
right.
Satan essentially says, well, Job is for you and loves you because you've given him so much. I mean, Job was a wealthy guy. He had a big family. He had a lot of money. He had a lot of land. And he said, if you take those things away from him, I mean, Job's going to turn on his face and turn against you. And God says, you want to bet? And he goes, all right. So God allows all this terrible shit to happen to Job.
Right.
Like out the gate, it's like a dude comes in and he's like, hey man, like all your cows died. And and he's like, damn. And then the next guy comes in and he's like, hey man, like all of your fields are suddenly on fire. We don't have any food or crop. He's like, damn, I got no food, but like at least got my family. And like another guy comes in, he's like, your son just died. And he's like, dude, are you kidding me? And another guy comes in, he's like, your daughter. And he's like, are you kidding?
Like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think it's his wife. So I think he's left alone.
Right.
But it's not until the end of the book that Job forsakes God.
Right.
And throughout the story of Job, the devil keeps saying, well, Job will fall on his face if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, which I think kind of speaks to the devil not knowing the future because he was wrong. There's also a verse, and I don't know the verse, but it's
good point.
Man, I'm gonna have to look it up after the podcast. I mean, it's not pertinent to what we're talking about,
right?
So we'll look it up afterwards. But there is a verse where it says, like, if the rulers knew that Jesus was the way to salvation, they would have never killed him.
Oh, right.
Right, and I think it's like I think it's in Corinthians or First Chronicles or something like that. But I'll look it up for you afterwards, right? Okay. But I personally don't know. I don't know if the devil can see the future or not. But that is...
There's evidence that why he can't, though, right?
Exactly. Yep. And so I think just to have the claim of, you know, there's Talmud. Let me look up his name real quick.
Talmud.
Semiramis and Tammud. Tammud.
Tammud, okay.
Yeah. Semiramis and Tammud, who's, you know, given to birth through an immaculate conception, obviously didn't happen because she was out fucking. Right. But yeah, so I don't know about that. But she gives birth to Tammuz. Tammuz. T-A-M-M-U-Z. Tammuz. Officially, that's his name. And Tammuz and Semiramis are worshipped at that point.
Right.
Together as a virgin mother, as a mother who gave birth through an immaculate conception, and a sudden like demigod. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And Nimrod is then the sun, thus giving you two forms of ancient worship. So you go into the sun worship.
Right.
Throughout history, people have been worshiping the sun.
Yep.
And then you have mother-child worship. So throughout history, Nimrod is kind of known as the father of paganism. People, especially in the Christian church, but outside of it, you can kind of see how these stories of how these great men, about these god of gods, these king of kings, i.e. Zeus and Jupiter, will, you know, rule over nations, or how someone like Horus in Egypt is killed and slain and chopped up in 7 different pieces and spread out across the land. And then Isis and Osiris, who the mother and the son, you know, Isis says that she has a immaculate conception from the son, which Horus became, and then gave birth to Osiris.
Damn.
Right. So you see all of these kind of parallels that are playing out with Nimrod and his family, really through Semiramis. Like you have Nimrod who was trying to elevate himself, right? But Semiramis is the one who like pushed that narrative.
She's running with it now.
She's running with it. So much so that there are gods who are named after her. Ishtar is like the derivative one that everyone's like, yeah, it's very likely that Ishtar is based off of Semiramis.
Right.
And Ishtar's a very fascinating goddess. I mean, she's the goddess of fertility. And can you look up just Ishtar real quick?
Absolutely. So
she's the goddess of, I think it's like fertility and probably cheating on your spouse. So Ishtar is primary Mesopotamian, right, which is where Babylon was.
Right.
Goddess closely associated with love and war. Okay. The powerful Mesopotamian. Yeah, Inanna. That's another name for her as well. Inanna.
And what's her like Latin? There's a Latin word for her. Because what was the path of Semiramis's like potential impact on America?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
So
where you're headed with this?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So we got Ishtar right now.
you have Ishtar. So I mean,
God of love and war.
you have like Nimrod influencing a bunch of different cultures and regions. And I mean, if you think about it, if Babylon was this great city, right, that was ruled by Nimrod, who a lot of people probably didn't even know him, right, and deified him, and then they moved, and there were all these different languages, they would be telling the same story over and over, but there could be just different words for them.
Yep.
Right?
That's a good point. Yep.
And you kind of see how, like you're saying with Satanism, if you go back to our episode 15 where we talk about Altion exposing the Freemasons, they were building an obelisk, right? Like the Tower of Babel is an obelisk, which is of Freemasonry, which is of Luciferianism.
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Huh.
So you have Ishtar.
Okay.
And
who is
Semiramis.
Semiramis as a god? Is that what?
Essentially,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Deified Semiramis.
Okay.
And you fast forward all the way to when we had the Statue of Liberty. So you have the Statue of Liberty, obviously in America. And I forget who exactly built it. But the thing that is true about the people who built it, Frederick Augustin Bartholdi. And it's another guy, too.
Okay.
Can you say his name? Frederick?
Oh, hell no.
Frederick Auguste Bartholdi. France. His name sounds oddly Italian.
It does.
But him and the guy who he built it were they were Freemasons. And when they were asked about the Statue of Liberty, they would say, "Well, we're not building the Statue of Liberty. We're building a statue of Libertas."
Libertas.
Okay. So you got Libertas. And Libertas, funny enough, can you pull up a picture of her?
Yeah.
She's that's what she looks like, just like the Statue of Liberty. She is based off of Ishtar, who is based off of Semiramis. And if you see there, can you go to the one all the way to the right on the top?
Right there.
Yep. So what does that look like that's behind her?
It looks like her little spike hat, but also like a sun.
Like beams of a sun ray.
Absolutely.
Right? Worshipping the sun.
Wow.
Okay. So from Libertas, I think in the 1900s, that there's another lady that's made, another goddess, if you may, called Columbia. And Columbia was made for America. I don't know when she was made, but yeah, literally has the American flag, stands about in the same position that Libertas does.
Huh.
Right?
Right.
And all of Columbia's stuff, I mean, you have the Columbia pictures, and if you think of like Washington, D.C., Washington District of
Columbia, bro.
Who is Libertas.
Who is Semiramis, bro? Semiramis?
Semiramis.
Semiramis!
Yeah, she's got a hard... Well, it's okay. I couldn't say Tammuz for about 15 minutes, so it's all good.
That is insane. So let's track this for everybody here. So is Libertas the same as Ishtar? Ishtar is known as the mother of harlots because of prostitution was part of her religious practices.
Which is also a part of Semiramis, right? Like Semiramis was fucking all those dudes.
Right. Yes. She was worshipped as Astarte in the Middle East. Scripture called her Astoreth, and she was known as in Latin as Libertas. There's your connection right there. Is that Ishtar is... You just talk about her in a Latin context, and she's Libertas. So that's almost literally no difference. It's just referring the name. Mm-hmm. We're just calling her a Latin name rather than this name. Okay. And then that Libertas is the inspiration for the Statue of Liberty, and that Statue of Liberty, Libertas, is the inspiration for Columbia.
Right.
And then Columbia is the goddess of Ishtar of Semiramis, and she owns a district of the capital of our
in America,
United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a state; she's her own entity a district of Columbia.
Well, I never thought about that. Yeah. Well, my question that I just thought about is like, was Columbia around before Washington D.C.? And I don't know that.
Ooh, let's look up.
But yeah, man, when you really look at it, it's like it is very likely that there was a giant city back in the day with a dude who ran it, whose name is kind of up in the air. Ninus,
right?
You know, Emmekar. I mean, even a lot of people attribute him to Moloch because throwing babies into fire was a big thing in Babylon as well. Which, if you know anything about, it's not Joshua Tree. It's
the Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove. They worship an owl god named Moloch.
They toss effigies into that motherfucking fire. Richard Nixon.
So Nimrod is kind of the
17th century though.
Yeah, 17th century, and that's going to be the 1800s. So I mean, the District of Columbia was around before Miss Columbia herself, but
good point. So we got to research where that Columbia is actually referring to, because I'm sure sure Wikipedia's got a general, but yeah.
But I don't know.
Always research everything.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So yeah, I just think that it's very capable that this happened, that there was a king back in the day,
right?
You know, building a tower, everyone spreads.
Absolutely.
No one really knows their name. And when you look at Nimrod, you see that Nimrod is essentially the first Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of Antichrist like prototype.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, wants everyone to abandon from God, wants to become God himself, make people think that they don't need God, that even to turn to God is a cowardly thing. But the crazy thing about Babylon is coming back. If you look at Revelations, you have, this is Revelation 17, and I'm going to read a little bit. We'll obviously break stuff down and stop, but in Revelation 17, you have, and there came one of the seven angels, so that John's in a vision right now, right?
Okay.
He sees angels, and one of the angels which had 7 vials, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show you until the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. So they have committed fornications with her, the kings have.
Okay.
And the inhabitants of the earth have been drunk with her wine of her fornication. So he carried me away into the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy. So the beast has the names of blasphemy.
Okay.
Having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet color, which, I mean, are very similar things to Babylon back in the day.
True.
Babylon was
which
big.
is also what they put on Christ, right?
I think so.
I think they put a purple robe on him, or something purple.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. Have a gold cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Okay?
Okay.
So you have Mystery Babylon, and it calls it 3 things.
So this is something separate, obviously, from Babylon. Yeah, Babylon, and then something new, which is Mystery Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But it is still referring to old Babylon. It's comparing it almost.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. It's like prototype and then your 2.0 or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it calls it 3 things. It calls it the Great, the mother of harlots, and abominations of the earth.
Okay.
So it's saying it's mother of harlots and of abomination of the earth, right? So I guess it's kind of saying 2 things. But it's 3 distinct also.
Yep.
Okay. So you have the Great. So obviously it's going to be a great nation, a great city. It's going to be a great gathering of people.
Right.
And you have the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, I think this is really interesting, foreshadowing some of our future episodes about the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you think about, in my view, and I'll just say this right now, I believe that the Holy Spirit is very fluid in the genderification of what it is. I definitely believe that the Holy Spirit is the mother of everything, and more oftentimes than not probably takes on a feminine persona.
Right.
I think you can see that in it's John 14:26. I want to say, I'm probably getting that verse wrong, but it's where it says, Jesus says that he will send a comforter and he will be amongst you. And that word comforter is capital C. In some translation, it's helper. And if you think that God would send the Holy Spirit to comfort, and you compare a man and a woman, off of some Andrew Tate knowledge.
Who you gonna send?
Who are you going to send?
I'm sending the bitch. But in a real manner though, a woman is a great comforter.
Yes. Now
On a real
I
note.
would say
On a real note.
on a real note, but I would say if someone needed to be comforted and they were like, "Hey, would you send Cougar to do this?" I would send you. You know what I mean? And I think that you would say something similar about me.
Yeah,
that if
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
"Hey, is he a good comforter?" Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
Like he's a good person.
Like,
He's going to listen to you.
he's a man, so he's not. Yeah, sounds.
But I would never send Andrew Tate
absolutely
to comfort anybody.
Yep.
About anything.
Yep.
Right.
But there's also probably a woman who's Andrew Tate-esque that I would not send to comfort somebody
Absolutely.
as well, or
but
whoever.
more
right.
often than not, I would venture to say you'd probably send someone who's feminine.
Yeah.
Or a woman.
The feminine energy. Yep.
Yes.
Wants
Okay.
to take care and caress and hold and protect.
So it's interesting when it calls Mystery Babylon the mother
Right.
of harlots
Okay.
and abominations of the earth, saying that the Spirit of God, in order to get the closest representation you can, maybe like the other Jesuses, right, the other versions of Christ,
Right.
you would need a female.
Okay.
Like that the lady is going to be able to entice. And I think that you could say this more. Women are very enticing,
Absolutely.
much more than men.
Much.
You know what I mean? Like
Much.
just like no matter who you are as a woman, and this is getting off the podcast episode, but you're always going to find someone who wants you and is attracted to you, no matter who you are as a woman.
Did you know that women swipe right on 4% of profiles that they see on Tinder?
No way,
And
dude.
men like 60-70%.
Dude, it's like 95%. Dude, those boys are lying.
Yep.
And the girls,
there's a huge difference for sure.
the girls might have upped their numbers too to seem like they weren't so shallow.
It's not such, yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Ugh.
So, but there is that discrepancy, 100%.
Okay, so moving on. This is Revelation 19, verse 6.
Okay.
And I saw the woman drunken with blood and saints and the blood of martyrs of Jesus, right? So even specifically the blood of the saints and the blood of the people who have died for Christ.
Okay.
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 And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said to me, "Where didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast that thou sawest," so the beast he saw, the thing that the woman was riding on, "was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition." Okay, perdition is, you can look up the definition of it if you want
Was
to.
and is not.
Was and is not.
And is not. Okay. Was and
So
is
it
not.
used to exist, but right then when John's writing this, or the gospel, the Apostle John, when he's writing this, it's not. It was, and it is not.
And is not now. Okay. Okay.
And Babylon was, right, and is not.
Okay.
Okay.
And what word was I looking up the definition?
Perdition. Perdition has a lot to do with arrogance. So it's a Christian theology, a state of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unpenitent, which means like someone who doesn't repent, person passes after death.
Like hell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's punishment.
Okay.
Okay. So it says, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition." So even after ascending out of the bottomless pit, it's still going to go into eternal punishment.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And they
Okay.
dwell and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, this is interesting for Calvinism, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundations
I've
of the
heard this one.
earth, and they will behold the beast that was and is not and yet is.
That was, is not, and yet is.
And here is the mind which hath wisdom. And this is really where we get it, okay?
Okay.
The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth.
Okay.
And there are 7 kings. 5 that have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition.
So he would be was, is not,
And
but
is yet to come.
Yet to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have 5 kings that were,
Right.
right? You have 1 that is, and you have 1 that is yet to come. And
Okay.
you have a beast, which is of the 7, right? And is also and it was and is not, and he is the 8th. Okay?
Okay.
So if you think about what I was saying earlier about and I think we talked about it on this podcast, you have the 5, yeah, we did, because it's talking about Babylon.
Mhm.
You have the 5 ancient empires.
Yes. Yep.
You have Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, Persia, and Greece.
Right.
Those all came and went before Rome.
Okay.
Okay, which is in the time that supposedly John is writing.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Then you have Rome, one that is. So you have 5 kings that were, one that is, and that one is yet to come.
Okay.
And a lot of people want to attribute that to the Ottoman Empire,
Okay.
which did reign for a while, and spread vastly among the earth and whatnot. But I think it's probably closer to Britain. We good?
Yep. No, you're
Okay.
good. Keep going.
I think it's probably closer to Britain.
Okay.
Britain actually has a monarchy, so they actually have a king, which is something
Right.
similar to all of these people as well,
Okay.
right? And they really spread out across the land.
Right.
England is the UK is a very small place, but its reach amongst slavery and amongst like the beginning of the earth really stretched far, creating them an empire.
Right.
And they also have another part of the world that broke off from them,
Okay.
America,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So you have 5 kings that were, you have one that is, and you have one that is yet to come. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th.
Okay.
America.
Oh, because we don't have a king. We're not a king. We are the beast that came from the kings. That came from the 7th king. That came
Exactly.
From the UK.
But the beast was. So of the 5 original empires, what is America going to be closest to? In my opinion, it's probably Babylon.
Babylon. Yeah.
Which if you go back into verse 5, upon her head was written the name Mystery Babylon, the Great, America, Trump, make America great again, MAGA.
Yep.
America is and has been known as the greatest
As
nation.
Great. Yep.
The mother
The
of
great.
harlots and abominations of the earth. Americans love sin. Americans don't love God because they don't want to give up their own sovereignty.
Yep.
And they don't want to give in to the sovereignty of God.
Yep.
Okay? And this is the last thing that I'll say about this.
Okay.
And this is maybe some BS. Maybe it's something.
Okay. Let's hear it.
How many letters are in the word mystery?
7.
Babylon,
7.
America.
7, baby.
777, baby.
Huh.
So, that begs the question, if we are Babylon, do we have a Nimrod?
Do you think it seems like Nimrod in this, he's the face, but do you think he's the guy? Because do you think we would know our Nimrod?
I think personally Satan would always be the guy, like the adversary.
The
who's gonna be
ideology
pushing
they
you.
follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Is going to be, because who knows really what Nimrod was worshiping. If he wasn't worshiping himself, he was probably worshiping Satan.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And even if he's worshiping himself, that's what he's doing.
He's worshiping Satan.
And so I guess you could say, like, when Trump was in, maybe you could make a claim that our Nimrod is in there, but he's no longer in there. So I don't know. I wouldn't say Joe Biden's Nimrod.
Are you sure?
I mean, he doesn't seem that impressive. You know what I'm saying? I could see Trump being Nimrod. I could see Trump with his presence and the way that he carries himself is like, holy fuck. But like Joe, I mean, he just doesn't seem dangerous
Really?
enough to be
That's-
like the heavy hitter. Yeah.
That's so crazy, dude. His nickname is actually always Active Joe.
Active Joe.
Yeah, Active Joe is what they
Right.
call him. They call him Awake Joe. So that's so crazy because that dude's always just,
He's just
guns a moving.
right away, baby.
No, I mean Trump
Awake
is. I
Joe.
think Trump is a good. He's a good idea.
Mhm.
I think George Washington could be a Nimrod.
Oh, yeah.
Right, like especially with him being a Freemason. And there was the picture that you showed me of like, there's all of the gods that are around George Washington. Like from like, you know, the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology and all that. Can you bring that up possibly?
What is that called?
I don't know. You showed it to me. I thought it's like this picture of, it's like George Washington in the middle and he's surrounded by all these gods. And you brought this up to me. Like, it's almost like he was
The apotheosis of Washington.
And it's almost like he was trying to be like the god of gods
Absolutely.
in this moment.
I'm gonna zoom in.
Where's he at?
He's right in the
Oh, he's right there. Yeah, and he's just surrounded by...
doing his little weird hand gesture right there. I'd like to point out, but yeah, these are the Greek gods. Neptune. I don't know, if it's Roman or whatever, but
They're a bunch of gods.
and then someone, which again, this is just a theory that he's put in the middle to present himself as like Zeus, as like the god of gods,
Right.
that everyone is around and worshiping.
Or Nimrod.
Or Nimrod.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
To me, I think you also have to look into what was Nimrod trying to accomplish. And Nimrod was trying to accomplish deity in himself, amongst himself, and almost amongst the people, to say that they wouldn't need God. This is a big claim, bro.
Okay, let's hear it. I'm ready for it.
Okay. If we took away the ability to not know, do you think that would make us more like God? If we had...
So be like more like Adam and Eve?
Do you think if we had the opportunity to gain information like that, anything in the world, do you think that would make us more like God or not?
I'd say it's godlike if we could do that.
If you think that we could communicate without actually doing what we're doing now, talking on a podcast with our emotions and inflections,
right?
And I could speak to you just by looking at you,
yes.
Do you think that would make me more godlike?
Yes, like supernatural.
Supernatural,
yes, for
right?
Sure. Yep.
If I had the ability to expand the bandwidth in my brain, to literally expand the type of knowledge that I can keep. Like if you have a certain finite number and you could expand how much you were computing and going through, do you think that would make you more godlike?
Yeah, yep.
And do you know anyone who's trying to do those things?
Elon Musk? Is that right?
Yeah.
With all the brain shit.
I think so, bro. I think so. And I think even with his want to go to Mars, to say that we need to get off of this planet and go somewhere else, that makes us more like gods.
100%.
You know what I mean? When we're interplanetary,
we'll choose our own planet. Yeah,
you can just choose where you live.
And he was talking about nuking the poles of Mars to create a cover over, because if there's
like a dome.
Yeah, it's like a dome. There's ice at the poles of Mars that if you nuke and warm up, could produce streams and oceans and shit and maybe bring back life. That's what he was talking about.
Wow.
But that's the thing. Yeah, we'll go create our own planet. We don't need the one that God made. Fuck that. Let's go to Mars, baby.
Yeah, dude.
That's that mentality. It's not that he literally will be able to accomplish that. Maybe not. But that ideology. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about that is Nimrod, Cush was the most south person to settle. Like all of his family kind of settled very South Africa.
Right. Okay.
So they were known as people with like dark skins. And a lot of people will say that like the second coming, if they're going to be like Nimrod, they also have to be black. I think that's kind of a racist thing to say. And if you just look at where Elon Musk is from, which I think
South Africa.
Absolutely. I think that you can make the
Damn.
distinction. But I don't want to claim that Elon Musk is the Antichrist, but that
He's coming.
It might or might not be the title of this episode.
Yeah, and you have to wait the whole time to get to this point for it. So I got one more thing before we wrap this all in.
Okay.
And this is things that, because I went down the Nephilim hole as well. But whatever, I just happened to click a different video and I found some things that I just wanted to run by you and see what you think.
Okay.
So the sons of God, that's really important for this because that's who were fucking these girls, right?
Yeah.
And they were having children with these girls, right? Okay, so we just read this, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. So here's just something to think about here. John 3:6, and let me pull this up. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. Okay, so just hang on to that. Matthew 22:30. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. So, and let me find, what are these? Because what this is saying is that that demons can't reproduce with flesh. And that this is claiming that for in the resurrection, the angels that are in heaven don't marry nor are given in marriage. You see what I'm saying? And so that may just pertain to the angels of God in heaven. But if these are the angels of God, which are fallen angels, you know what I'm saying? They may not be given in marriage. That might not be part of the thing. But this John 3:6 is really interesting to me because of it just seems to me that there's flesh and flesh and spirit and spirit. You know what I'm saying? That was kind of the argument that those brought up. But
yeah, it's interesting. I think if you think that they weren't able to reproduce with women, then that would kind of say that Genesis 6 is not true.
Well, because that's the thing is then you get into the definition of the sons of God.
The sons of God, yeah.
Because at times in Job, the sons of God present themselves before God, and then Satan is there, right? But we can just run this through here.
Can you go back up real quick?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
You're good.
To Genesis 6:4 again.
6:4, yep.
And there were giants in those days, and when the sons of God came into the daughters, they bear... Yeah, I guess it is... I mean, are we saying that the giants are the angels as well? Like the fallen angels?
Well, and so that's the thing is that are they talking about the sons of God or are they talking about giants?
Right.
That are with the women. And from what I understand, they're talking about the sons of God. And so when we run the sons of God through the Bible, we get Job, where they seem more like angels. But damn it, I'm not going to be able to find it. Yeah, right there. Present themselves before the Lord.
Yep.
Oh, dude, I thought I had...
What are you trying to say?
Well, I literally thought I had a verse that said... that referred to sons of God, but we're referring to like humans, like just like people, like just men. And so then that could be that either because they also are talking about fallen angels, but it could also be that if fallen angels literally can't reproduce with flesh, that when they are referring to the sons of God in 6:2, that they're just talking about the men of the mighty. You know what I'm saying? The flesh. And then if that's true, then that's the contradiction that comes with Enoch, is that Enoch elaborates on this pivotal, like the fallen angels got to fuck the girls for this story to work. You know what I'm saying? But so I guess it all just kind of is hung up on what John 3:6 comes out to mean. And then like, behold my hands and my feet, that is I myself, handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones as ye see me have. Damn, I really thought I had one that I was like, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God without rebuke in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us. So he's not referring to fallen angels right there, right?
No, he's referring to the sons of God. Or I have a verse right here that's Romans 8:29-30, which says, "For those whom he knew, he also predestined to be conformed to his image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called, and those who he has also justified, and he has justified, and he has glorified." And that relates to me to Colossians 1:15, where he says he is the image of God, the firstborn of all creation.
Right.
So when you see in 29 where he says, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers, those he's are not capitalized.
Right.
So they're referring to us.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
But if you see that we would be the firstborn among many brothers, in Colossians, it's referring to Jesus. And it says he is in the image of the visible Father, firstborn of all creation. Right. So I agree with you where throughout the Bible, it does say that the sons of God are both Jesus is the Son of God. We are the sons of God.
Right.
But I think that it could also mean that there were angels
Absolutely.
who were the sons of God.
Yep.
Right. So I do agree with you where it's like, well, what are you defining as the sons of God in this? And I guess it's just on the viewer to go see what that word really means.
Right. And then that gets into the interpretation of John talking about, if flesh is born of flesh and spirit is born of spirit, then that does... Because if that's not the case and they can reproduce, then this is up for interpretation of both things. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I don't know about that. What you're saying about John is I don't really agree with how you're defining it, I guess. So to me, what that means is like flesh is born of flesh and spirit is born of spirit means whatever you try to achieve in your flesh, you're going to achieve it only in flesh.
Right.
Whereas, and that's what you're going to be born into, right? Like when we are baptized, or accept God, we're new creations.
Right.
So we're born again, and spirit is born of spirit. I'd probably need to see the verse in context, but I would probably say just off the top of my head that it's saying that your flesh is born of your flesh, and your and whatever you try to pursue spiritually is what you're going to produce. Is what you're going to seek spiritually.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because I think if you take that, it'd be really hard to justify Jesus.
Right.
You know, because if Jesus is fully God and fully man, and he can only be born of one, he wouldn't be born of flesh. He would either be born of flesh or spirit. You know what I mean?
Right. But wouldn't the Immaculate Conception kind of reconcile that?
Sure, but if it's the sons of man, it would be the same thing, in my opinion. Like, not the Immaculate Conception, but if you were... So you're saying that Jesus would be able to do it because the Holy Spirit came upon Mary, thus having spirit and flesh.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Whereas the fallen angels, I mean, maybe they had fleshly bodies, but they definitely had some sort of spiritual, I don't know, prowess or gain, or they had some sort of spirit in them.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so I kind of think that it'd be hard to justify Jesus by just saying that it means physical birth.
Yeah, that's fair.
In that verse.
That's fair. So real quick, because this is just...
Yeah, what's the actual verse?
What was our, like, John 3:6. Okay. Let me pull this.
Nicodemus saith unto him that hold on, you can make a man... Okay, yeah, so Nicodemus saith unto him, how can a man... So Nicodemus is asking how to be reborn in this. And he says, how can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second kingdom into his mother's womb and be born again? Or can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born again? Jesus answered, verily, 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 I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of spirit. So that's talking about baptism, right?
Right.
Be born of water and spirit. He cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven.
So up until right now, what does born mean? They're talking about a literal birth, right? Okay.
Jesus answered, verily, verily, I say to you, except a man be born of water and of the spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. That which born of the flesh is flesh, and that which born of spirit is spirit. So I think it's not referring to...
So why the shift from born here to born here?
Because Jesus isn't talking about your physical life. He's talking about your spiritual, your salvation.
I thought he's talking about that here with the spirit is spirit.
Okay. So Jesus is going around talking about like baptism, right? And when people get baptized, he's saying they're getting born again.
Right. Okay.
Do you think that he means a physical born?
No,
right? Because he says that in Nicodemus, where Nicodemus is like, do I have to come back in my mom and then come out?
Right. And they're referring to a literal birth right here. A literal born birth. Okay.
And then Jesus says, except a man being born of water and of the spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. So what gets you into the kingdom of heaven? Water and spirit, right? Being born again in baptism. This just in this short context, that's what it's saying.
Okay. And that's a literal birth.
Do you think so?
Well, what does born of water mean?
Born of water is baptism.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. I was thinking like water breaking on a woman.
No.
Right. But
no, born of water
because this context is baptism. Yep.
Yes.
That's fair.
Yes, means baptism. Okay. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which born of spirit is spirit.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that he's referring to you're born. Okay. So maybe it's like if you're born of flesh and you don't seek anything higher than that, you're going to die in flesh.
Right.
But if you're born in spirit, yes.
Right.
But if you're born of spirit, you can be born again and enter the kingdom of God.
Okay.
Because that which is born of spirit is spirit.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So I don't think that Jesus is really talking about physical birth here. So I don't think that really applies to the fallen angels.
Would it be a general principle, though, that flesh can only come from flesh? And so flesh pursuits will only give you flesh rewards and consequences. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like the law of flesh. And so you could apply that to flesh, like flesh comes from flesh.
Why can you apply that?
Because that's what it says right there. Born of the flesh is flesh. And so if flesh is coming from flesh, then you don't get flesh when you mix something, when you bring in something that doesn't have any flesh. You see what I'm saying?
I don't think Jesus is talking about it. And this is where we disagree, bro.
Yeah,
I
fine.
don't think Jesus is talking about a physical birth at all. Obviously, he's saying that Nicodemus, which I just want to point out, that Nicodemus is talking about being born of flesh.
Literal,
And Jesus says, except a man who is born. So his first word of being born is talking about a metaphorical thing. Right? And he says, that which is born of flesh is flesh.
Right.
That which is born of flesh is death, essentially is the way that I think you could put it. And that which is born of spirit is life.
Right.
That which you only pursue in death, you're only going to receive in death.
Right.
And that which you pursue in life, you're going to receive life.
Yep.
So I don't think Jesus is talking. So I would disagree with saying that's saying that they can't have sex with fallen angels. Essentially,
right?
Because I don't know much about the fallen angels in general, whether they had bodies, whether they didn't, whether how tall they were, whatever. But it's definitely said that there were giants on the earth in the Bible, and that there were the sons of man, whatever that means, or sons of God.
Yep. And you can dive further into that.
Big tangent.
Episode 3.
But yeah, man, that's what I know and what I learned about Nimrod. And
beautiful.
The only reason I did any of that is because you asked me, hey, man.
It's a deep hole.
What do you know about Nimrod?
Yeah. What do you know about him? You're like, nothing really. And then
suddenly everything, dude.
Yeah.
Suddenly, like 2 days later, I was like, bro, I texted you. I was like, Nimrod's a big player.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
I was like, dude, you don't know, man.
Yeah.
Nimrod is the father.
Yep. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of context and nuance.
Oh, dude, hold on. Before we leave, Cougar, I have to blow your mind.
All right, blow my mind.
Okay. So, as everyone knows, Cougar and I, we've been doing this podcast for a little bit. We're here doing Bible secrets, and we've talked about all sorts of stuff on this podcast. All sorts of stuff. I mean, I've been running the podcast while you've been away for a little bit. Been talking with other people. Can you give me like your top favorite thing that we've talked about ever?
I'll say the Altion stuff.
Yeah, right. I would probably say that's just the podcast. We did a lot of work for that podcast. Watching the video, I was going back a lot. Watching
5.5 hour video, bro.
Dude, so long. And subsequently, the Altion podcast is also the one where we got our most views. It's also the one where we get the most comments, and just the most traction we get is from Altion Child's Exposes Freemasonry.
Shout out
Alti. And the other day, I went back, just because sometimes I like to go back, and I like to read some of the comments. Okay? And here's what a comment from a user called In a Turquoise Mood says. This is on our podcast 11 months ago.
Okay.
The oldest pagan religions are grounded in sun worship, actually, which is in turn are traced all the way back to Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel in the Bible. The ancient mystery religions are all worshiping the sun. The Egyptians, the Phoenicians, don't know how to say that, etc., etc. These essentially are false religions inspired by Satan, quote unquote, the light bearer. Freemasonry traces its roots all the way back to ancient mystery religions, which were based on sun worship, and they predated Christianity. Altion is correct on that. His video shows an Egyptian obelisk in the St. Peter's, something about St. Peter's in the Vatican. Mm-hmm. Why would the Pope endorse an ancient symbol of sun worship in the Vatican? Because the Vatican adopted many pagan rituals and symbols into its religion, and that's why its Pope is a Freemason too, as the video showed. The papacy is the Antichrist revealed in the books of Daniel and Revelation in the Bible. Yeah. Granted authority by Satan, the dragons, as the Bible says. So it makes perfect sense to see the Rome performing the Masonic signs that he does in Altion's presentation.
Wow.
Dude, it's been right in front of our eyes the whole time.
Wow. Holy
fuck.
What I mean? They just summed up that whole podcast right there. You know what I'm saying?
We could have just read that podcast and just moved on.
And just skipped right over, dude. That's... people know this stuff, and I think the only way we're going to be able to get through any of this is if we all are willing to have conversations about it, because there are patterns. There's undeniable patterns, and to write things off as a coincidence, I think shows that someone isn't willing to sit down and really look at things that are going on, which is fine. But to make such a kind of surface level claim of like, it's just, just coincidence, that just shows I don't really give a fuck. And these guys, the symbol makers, they really gave a fuck. And that's the whole thing, is like, these symbols are old and ancient, and they seem to be just sliding through time. That's powerful. That's power. How many people have been able to do something like that? Jesus Christ. But like, these symbols are crazy, and they're everywhere. And like, so many triangles with an eye in the middle. It's like, okay, what's going on? Mm-hmm. Why could you not do anything different? Why is it exactly the same, Catholics? Why is that? That's weird. Okay. And again, that's where I get comfort from the Bible, is that that's saying that any symbols, those things are not what you want. It's that relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And that's where we get, even to the Trinity is something that scares me, is that it's a concept that is that's abstracted from the Bible, which isn't technically incorrect, but you create theories off of it, you create symbols off of it, and it can get out of hand very quickly. That's where I tend to kind of just reel in a little bit for myself. But that person summed it up beautifully. Again, it's not objective truth. Go find it for yourself. But like, research these fucking ancient religions. They worried about it. They were concerned about it. They contended with it every day. So it's there, and it's deep, and it's hard. It takes fucking hours, bro. But it's what we do out here. We do it for you.
And if you're curious, man, DuckDuckGo exists. Google exists, even if they're tracking your data.
Bro, I've been on Google more than anything the past fucking couple weeks.
Yeah, I feel that.
Crazy.
Google and YouTube, baby.
Yeah, YouTube. Yeah.
So thank you guys so much. If you're out there, please don't be no Nimrod. Love
don't be
God.
No Semiramis, fucking whatever it
and
is.
Don't be no Talmudies.
Talmudies.
Don't do any of that.
Talmudies.
Thank you guys. This is Bible Secrets. Bye.